Men may not always say what they feel, but their behaviors whisper the truth louder than words. But what if you've spent your whole life trying to decode what was never said, and in doing so, overlooked what was silently revealed? If you've ever found yourself lying awake analyzing a man's message, his tone, or worse, his silence, you're not alone. For many women, especially those shaped by years of emotional misattunement or inconsistent love, it's easy to overvalue words and undervalue actions, because we were conditioned, often from childhood, to believe that love had to be declared to be real. That clarity would come in the form of promises, declarations, or poetic confessions. But what if the real truth lies not in what he says, but in what he does when he doesn't even know he's doing it? In Freudian terms, the unconscious is always speaking, through slips, habits, reflexes, and patterns, through a hand that lingers too long, through the way someone positions their body in a crowded room, or through the subtle shifts in tone when your name comes up in conversation. These aren't just coincidences, they're fragments of desire translated into behavior. And here's the hard truth. The male psyche, often shaped by emotional repression, rarely reveals attraction through grand verbal gestures. For many men, especially those unaccustomed to vulnerability, desire is expressed in quieter behavioral ways, through repetition, through remembering, through proximity. Freud would say, what is repeated is remembered, and what is remembered is meaningful. Let me be clear, this is not about chasing signs or reading tea leaves in his every move. It's about learning to observe, not obsess, and learning to trust what is consistently shown rather than what is temporarily said. Today, we'll explore 3 unconscious behaviors men often display when they're genuinely interested in a woman. And no, we won't be diving into pickup tactics or surface-level charm. We'll be listening to the language of the body, of attention, of closeness. A language that, unlike speech, doesn't lie so easily. And once you begin to notice these signs, you may start to realize something deeper, that much of what you've blamed yourself for, overthinking, feeling unseen, doubting your worth, had nothing to do with your ability to love, but everything to do with being with someone who never showed up with consistent, attuned behavior. There's a moment, subtle, often missed, when you're sitting across from a man and notice that he's taken a sip of his drink just after you did, or he leans back in his chair seconds after you shift your posture. At first it seems accidental, coincidence, but it happens again and again. His laugh starts to echo the rhythm of yours. His phrases begin to sound familiar, not because you've heard them before, but because they're yours. This is mirroring, a deeply unconscious behavior rooted in the human need for connection. And when it shows up, without planning, without manipulation, it often reveals something more powerful than a compliment or flirtation. It reveals attention. From a psychological standpoint, mirroring is the natural result of rapport. It's what occurs when one nervous system begins to align with another. In behavioral terms, it's a sign of nonverbal reinforcement, the subtle message of, I like being here with you, I want to be more like you, I feel safe with you. The body responds before the mind rationalizes. In Freudian language, this is the return of the repressed, not in trauma, but in desire. A man who is emotionally guarded may never utter a vulnerable truth, but his subconscious will speak through mimicry, through pacing, through small repetitions of your cadence, your tone, your expressions. His psyche may repress emotional exposure, but his body, in your presence, remembers the rhythm of intimacy. And make no mistake, this is not about flattery. This is not imitation for performance. This is the unconscious gravitating toward connection. It's one of the oldest social bonding mechanisms visible in both romantic and platonic intimacy. When a person mirrors you, they are attuning. They are with you, not just next to you. Consider this. A woman once described sitting at dinner with a man she'd seen only a few times. No dramatic declarations, no compliments that stood out. But by dessert, he was folding his napkin the same way she did, repeating a phrase she had casually used 2 weeks before, leaning in just slightly when she spoke, and leaning out just as she did when the conversation paused. He didn't notice any of it, but she did, and it said far more than any romantic line could have. Freud, observing these patterns, might say, repetition reveals where the ego leans. When someone unconsciously mimics another, it is not just behavior, it is affiliation. The desire to reflect you, to inhabit your emotional pace, to step into your inner rhythm without even realizing it. So how can you recognize mirroring without overanalyzing? Watch for synchronicity, not strategy. Does his speech shift toward your tone when you're relaxed? Does he adopt the same language patterns or even emotional intensity when you share something meaningful? Does his posture align with yours when you're seated together? And more importantly, does it stay that way? Or is it only present when he's trying to impress? Because here is the truth that many emotionally attuned women already know. Behavior that is real doesn't disappear when attention is lost. The man who mirrors you because he feels connected will do it unconsciously without trying. It won't be part of a game. It will be part of his nervous system's reaction to your presence. And if he doesn't mirror you, that doesn't always mean disinterest, but it does mean there is no unconscious rapport building, no deeper psychological resonance. In long-term emotional intimacy, attunement matters more than seduction. Resonance matters more than charm. So when a man begins to mirror you, not in grand gestures but in small repeated details, pay attention, not to flatter yourself, but to recognize that somewhere beneath his defenses, something in him is responding to your presence with genuine desire for connection. From here we move into an even more telling behavior, one that requires not just attention to your body, but to your voice. He remembers the little things you say. There's a specific moment, quiet, almost forgettable, when a man brings up something you mentioned in passing, perhaps weeks ago, the name of your childhood dog, the way your grandmother used to braid your hair, the fact that you can't stand the sound of someone chewing with their mouth open. You hadn't even realized he was listening, but he was. And more than that, he remembered. In the realm of human attachment, memory is not just mental, it is emotional. To remember someone's words is to hold them. It is a subtle form of reverence. And when a man remembers the little things you say, not because they're dramatic or impressive, but precisely because they're personal and quiet, that's not forgettable. That's intimacy forming. You see, most women, especially those who've lived through years of emotional neglect, dismissiveness, or inconsistency, carry an old imprint, the experience of speaking and not being heard, of opening their inner world and watching it fall into silence, of sharing small truths only to be ignored or overlooked, and what that creates over time is a quiet form of grief, a loss of trust in one's own voice. So when a man listens, and I mean really listens, something awakens. And it's not just romantic chemistry, it's psychological safety, it's emotional acknowledgement. And for many women that feels almost unfamiliar, almost suspicious. But it's not magic, it's presence. In Freudian terms, memory isn't passive, it is selective. We remember what moves us, even if we don't understand why. And when someone recalls what you've shared, they are telling you, unconsciously, you matter in my inner world. And that's the critical difference, because most men know how to appear attentive, but very few retain what doesn't serve them directly. To remember your favorite poet, your sister's name, or how you take your coffee, that's not about getting you. That's about seeing you. There was once a woman, strong, independent, long out of a toxic marriage, who went on a casual date. Nothing serious, she told herself. During the evening, she mentioned offhandedly that her father used to whistle a specific melody when he cooked, and that she hadn't heard that sound since he passed. Weeks later, on a quiet evening walk, the man began to hum that same melody. He didn't make a show of it, didn't explain, just let the sound float between them. And she cried, not because of the tune, but because for the first time in a long time her words had landed. Freud might say, what is remembered is not random. It is the residue of emotional significance. A man who stores your details is not collecting information. He is forming attachment, whether he knows it or not. This is where many women mistake politeness for depth. A man may compliment you, flatter you, even perform affection. But if he cannot recall who you are beneath the surface, if your life, your pain, your joy do not live in his memory, then you are not emotionally held. You are simply observed. And so I ask you, have you confused being heard with being understood? Have you mistaken his attention in the moment for his presence over time? Because there is a difference. A man who is present in your story will return to it, unprompted, He will reference what you've said not to manipulate, but because it echoes in him. It shaped his perception of you. It stayed. This isn't about testing a man or demanding proof. It's about recognizing that emotional interest is repetitive, consistent, and anchored in memory. And most importantly, it's about allowing yourself to be with someone who doesn't just want your body or your admiration, but wants to remember the small rooms inside you. As we move forward, there's another sign that reveals a man's real desire. Not through his ears or his words, but through space. The third behavior he shows when he's truly interested. He finds reasons to be physically close. It happens before you even realize it. In a room full of people, he always ends up next to you. When you speak, he leans in just a little too close. Not in a way that invades, but in a way that signals, "I want to feel you more clearly." He brushes past you lightly in the kitchen, finds excuses to sit beside you on the couch, not across, places his hand near yours and doesn't move it away. This is not coincidence. This is proximity seeking, one of the most primal and revealing expressions of attraction. From infancy, we are wired to seek closeness to what soothes us. A child leans into the parent that feels safe. A person in distress reaches for the one who comforts. And in adulthood, emotional interest almost always has a physical shadow. A man drawn to you will unconsciously move toward you. Freud would interpret this as libidinal energy, not merely sexual, but deeply relational. In Freudian theory, the libido is not just about sex, it's about life force, about the desire to attach, to merge, to connect. And physical proximity is often the unconscious theater of that desire. What matters here is not whether he touches you, but how he chooses closeness. Does he move closer when you're sad, or only when you're smiling? Does he linger near you when there's no reward, no intimacy, no praise, no performance, just quiet presence? These questions matter, because the truth is, a woman who has lived through manipulation, love bombing, or emotional scarcity often mistrusts touch. Not because she fears intimacy, but because she's been touched for access, not for affection. She's been drawn in only to be dismissed later, pulled close only to be pushed away. So now when a man reaches for her, her body asks, "What do you want from me?" But there is a difference between calculated touch and anchored closeness. A man who desires you from a place of truth does not touch you to get something. He leans near you because being near you regulates him. He doesn't need to declare it. His body has already declared it. In group settings, notice how he orients himself. Does he angle his chair toward you, even when others speak? Does he find excuses to help you with small things that bring his body closer to yours? A jacket, a spilled drink, a passing dish? Proximity is not always overt. Sometimes it is a slow, steady repetition. He always sits next to you, always walks beside you, not ahead. Always reaches out, a hand on your back, a light squeeze on your arm, in moments when you don't expect it. And most tellingly, he doesn't recoil when you're not at your best. There's a story of a woman who fell ill on a short trip with a man she'd just started seeing. Embarrassed, makeupless, curled up in discomfort, she expected distance. Instead, he sat close, held her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep, said nothing poetic, only whispered, "I'm right here," and stayed. Freud might comment, desire that is true does not retreat from discomfort. It remains. It seeks nearness even when there is nothing to gain. Physical proximity is one of the few behaviors that cannot be convincingly faked over time, because the body, unlike the mouth, betrays true intention. And when a man is drawn to your energy, not just your beauty, he will find ways to orbit you, not because he needs to impress, but because he needs to feel connected. For women who have spent decades giving touch instead of receiving it, soothing others, calming male egos, carrying tension in their shoulders from relationships where affection was conditional, this kind of closeness can feel foreign, or worse, dangerous. But it is worth learning to distinguish the difference between pressure and presence. One asks for something, the other offers something. So when a man finds consistent, tender ways to be near you, especially when you are not performing, not laughing, not giving, pause, notice, and trust the information. Not the story he tells with his words, but the one his body tells without him knowing. Because real desire doesn't shout, it draws near. And now that we've explored these three subtle but powerful behaviors, mirroring, remembering, and seeking closeness, we arrive at the heart of it all. The ability to read between the gestures and trust what a man's behavior reveals, even when his words hesitate. Let's close with a final reflection on how to decode his subtle signals, not through fantasy, but through grounded awareness. It's easy to become seduced by declarations, by the poetry of words, by the thrill of promises, by the fantasy of what could be. But here's the truth, most women don't hear often enough. A man's true interest is not measured by what he says in moments of charm, but by what he repeats in moments of ordinary life. And this is where so many heartbreaks begin, not from the absence of words, but from the misreading of behaviors. He says he cares, but forgets your birthday. He calls you beautiful, but doesn't notice your exhaustion. He says you're special, but flirts with someone else when your back is turned. The words are loud, but the behavior is incoherent, and your body knows, even before your mind dares to admit it. Freud might tell us, the unconscious is structured like a language, but it speaks through acts, not phrases, which means the truth you seek from a man will rarely come in a straight line. It will come in fragments, patterns, repetition. It will come when he leans in without thinking, when he quotes something you said weeks ago without realizing it, when he steps closer instead of pulling away when things get quiet or hard. These are not small things, they are everything, because they are the signs of attunement, the rarest form of modern connection. In a world where people perform affection and rehearse love, it is attunement that reveals who is truly present, who is listening, who is with you, not just beside you. And this is the invitation I leave you with. Stop asking yourself what he feels and start observing what he does. Does he return to you, not just in moments of pleasure, but in moments of stillness? Does he remember what matters to you, not because it benefits him, but because it moved him? Does he choose proximity, even when you're not giving anything away? These are not tactics to decode a man. These are signs of emotional availability. And if they're absent, the absence is the answer. Too many women have been taught to chase clarity in confusion, to stay where there is inconsistency, hoping it will one day transform into devotion. But you are not meant to decipher mixed signals for the rest of your life. You are meant to be met, fully, directly, without ambiguity. So the next time you find yourself wondering if he likes you, if he cares, if he's truly invested, step back from the fantasy. Listen to the silence between his words. Observe the rhythm of his behavior. Trust the way he moves or doesn't toward you. Because here's what Freud understood, and what women often forget. What a man repeats reveals what he feels, and what he forgets shows what he values. So I ask you, gently but directly, have you noticed these signs in someone recently? Has a man mirrored your rhythm, remembered your words, or drawn close without needing a reason? If so, share it. Let yourself name the experience, and if not, let that be clarity too. Because your nervous system deserves peace, not analysis, and you deserve love that doesn't need translation. Leave your reflections in the comments. Let this be a space where women no longer decode silence, but learn to trust what's clearly shown. And if this conversation spoke to you, subscribe. We're just beginning to uncover the truth behind emotional patterns, unconscious signals, and the power of feminine self-awareness.